Oh, thank God another Christmas is over. That means I can finally take off these bloody reindeer ears. I'm keeping my Skeletor jumper on though. This is going to stay throughout 2022. Try and stop me. Hey everyone, Ian here, and welcome to my Game of the Year video. As usual though, I'm doing something a little bit more off the wall than everyone else. I couldn't pick just one game. There's been some great stuff out this year, and I've decided to go for something a little bit weird that's kind of a game, but not a game. But first, before I get into all of that, I'm going to give you a little rundown, a little shout out, if you will, to all of the games that I've enjoyed the most this year. So, Returnal definitely has to be up there. Every hour I spent with that game was phenomenal. The visuals, the audio, the way it works with PlayStation 5's DualSense, all just a masterclass in presentation. The controls are fantastic too, and ducking and diving and dodging through all those plasma bullets or whatever the hell is being shot in my direction was absolutely incredible. I loved it. Sure, the difficulty was tough, but once I cracked it, I felt super powerful, and every time I got a little bit further, it just spurred me on to try again and again and again. And that wasn't the only thing. It wasn't just the challenge that kept me going. It was the fact that this is an amazing sci-fi story. It has these awesome Prometheus vibes to the visuals and the dark, moody tone to the mystery. Just had me on the edge of my seat and made me want to go through and hoover up as much lore and information from that game as possible. So close to being my game of the year, that was. Next up was Deathloop, and what can I say about Deathloop? I bet this is most people's game of the year, to be honest with you. The acting was on point. Colt and Juliana's characters were so well written and so well voiced. It was impossible not to fall in love with both of them. There was so much humour and passion in their work, so shout out to those voice actors as well, but also massive shout out to the art direction in that game. It was phenomenal, visually stunning and pretty much unforgettable for anyone who's laid eyes on it. The only letdown I can think of with that game was the multiplayer, which I really enjoyed, but the long lobby wait times and people dropping out as soon as you connected and stuff made a really fun and original multiplayer premise a little bit too much of a pain in the arse for the majority of people to want to dive into, I think. Next up is Valheim. Now, I actually had to check if Valheim actually came out this year, because it feels like it came out years ago now, but yeah, as we say on this channel a lot recently, time doesn't really have a meaning anymore. While we did stream a little bit of Valheim on this channel, I played the majority of this game with my friends offline, and we had the best time. We played it solidly for like a month, so solidly that my wife would joke that I loved Valheim more than her. Not true, came close, but not true. What I loved about this game so much, I think, was that it brought me back to the PUBG days of just it being a social game to hang out with my friends. You know, there was stuff to do. There was a goal. In PUBG, it's not die. In Valheim, it's not die and also build cool stuff and defeat massive bosses. But, you know, there's all these quiet moments in between where you're farming or building, or you can just have a natter with your friends and chill out, maybe have a beer or whatever. And it was great again for, you know, those kind of early months of 2021 where we were all a bit locked down or just didn't want to go out into the cold. So yeah, Valheim, great. And I guess the final shout out is going to have to be Halo Infinite, mainly because it's just on my mind right now, because it's only just come out at the time of recording this video. It's leagues above many other games for sound direction as far as I'm concerned. The grapple shot weapon is one of my favourite tools, weapons in a video game in recent years. So good. And just in general, 343 have pulled it back after a couple of disappointing Halos. They've managed to recapture what I think made Halo Championship Evolved feel so good back in the day. And for that, I'm very thankful because Halo's back, baby! Yes! But anyway, with those shout-outs out of the way, it's time to get on to the main event. Now, many of you eagle-eyed viewers out there may have noticed that I am currently sitting in one of Hitman 3's beautifully detailed levels. And that's because Hitman 3 is sort of my game of the year. I mean, well, it is, but it's also not, but it also is, but you'll see what I mean in a second. You see, Hitman 3 isn't just a great climax to the story that IO started when it remade or restarted the Hitman story back with Hitman 1 in, I don't know, what was it, 2016 or something? No, it's not just that. It's the fact that Hitman 3 has also given me some really memorable moments this year. For a start, I got my pal David Bateson, aka the voice of Agent 47, to record an intro to our Hitman Handler Challenge videos. This one here.
Good evening, Agents Wilson and Delahunty Light. I am Agent 47, and I will be your point of contact for today's exercise. After reading your case files, both Miss Burnwood and myself believe you are ready for the next step in your handler training, a live field test. Agent 32 will be your man on the ground today, and it will be up to both of you to guide him safely through this test. As you may have heard, 32 is somewhat of a loose cannon, but he has proven himself in the field multiple times. So, as long as you're observant and patient, you should be able to have him complete his objectives and slip in and out unseen with minimal collateral damage. Good luck, agents. I'll leave you to prepare.
Honestly, I still get chills when I listen to that intro. David Bateson was an absolute legend for going out of his way to record that for me, and I loved editing that and putting that all together. It was a really fun idea, and it's something you could have only really done with a Hitman game, I think. Another thing you could only do with a Hitman game this year was create contracts, your own little personal Agent 47 missions to go on that you can share with the world to see if other people can break your times or, you know, do your impossible missions. I got approached by IO Interactive to make 5 special Eurogamer themed contracts, which I did, and that you lot can still play on right now. That was an absolute honour to be asked to do it. It was really cool seeing mine, Zoe's and Aoife's names in the actual game along with the Eurogamer logo, and I had so much fun coming up with these random wacky challenges that kind of riffed off Eurogamer in-jokes, and also I think a lot of people did have fun murdering me. Too much fun maybe. But the biggest thing for me about Hitman 3, and the thing that made Hitman 3 so special for me, is, you've guessed it, the fact that you could play it in VR. But not just Hitman 3 in VR. IO Interactive didn't half-ass this. They made it so you could play Hitman's 1, 2, 3 and all the DLC in VR as long as you owned a PSVR headset and a copy of all 3 titles. And oh my gosh, what an absolute treat it was going through those levels that I'd previously played, but being able to experience them up close and personal. One of my favourite things about Hitman, any of the recent Hitman games, is how detailed the level design is. There's all these little props and bits of set dressing around that make it look so busy and alive, and being able to actually stand in those worlds and check those assets out from close up and, you know, wander through these massive Hitman crowds as I scanned for my targets was just jaw-dropping. What an incredible, amazing, and to be honest with you, quite brave achievement from IO Interactive to, you know, pump that amount of resources into turning their flat game into a VR experience. And that kind of leads me on to my true game of the year, or as it probably should be called this year, my mods of the year, because my true game of the year, the thing that stood out for me the most this year, was flat to VR mods. Hitman 3 is basically the perfect example of how a great game can be made even better with an optional VR mode. But it's something that very few companies actually do. Capcom did it just right with Resident Evil 7. Still one of my favourite VR games ever, and still one of my favourite gaming memories of all time playing through that game. So when it finally came to pass that they hadn't done the same thing for Resident Evil Village, well, I gotta say, I, along with pretty much the rest of the VR community, was very disappointed indeed. There were a couple of other standout commercially available flat to VR games though. Doom 3 BFG VR edition, or whatever it's called, was cracking. Had a lot of fun with that. It was very scary, even though the scale was a bit off. I played through the entire thing and loved every minute of it. And then, of course, there was the Resident Evil 4 release, which was definitely up there as one of the best VR games I've played all year. And both of those games just go to show that it is entirely possible to make incredible, highly polished VR experiences out of old games. So many game companies have an incredible backlog of video games that they could be turning into brilliant VR experiences right now, but in general they don't. And that's why the flat screen to VR modding community are the real stars of the show for me this year. They have outshone most of the big video game development companies in terms of bringing us really decent, long, meaty VR experiences, and they've shown us what can be possible with just a little bit of love for the VR community. Although I did showcase a few flat to VR mods last year, this year, especially in the last few months, I have featured loads of them, and they've opened up so many possibilities for me to be able to showcase to you lot exactly how cool VR can be. As far as I can remember, my flat screen to VR modding adventures started off for me in April this year when I featured a VR mod for Valheim. Valheim is traditionally a third-person game, so being able to see what I built previously in flat from a first-person, normal human being scale viewpoint was an absolute trip. And I even got to face off against Eikthyr with an actual bow and arrow a few weeks later after an update was added which put motion controls in the game. Hell, even sailing the seven seas in a tiny little boat was cool because it was really scary being out there on my own in a wooden boat in the middle of the ocean. But a few weeks after that little boat trip, I was having the time of my life underneath the ocean thanks to an incredible mod for Subnautica Below Zero. This flat screen to VR mod from Elliot Tate looks and plays like a dream in VR. Subnautica Below Zero already looks beautiful in 2D with all its great bright colours and lovely water effects, but diving below the surface of the water in VR is both beautiful and terrifying at the same time. You feel like you're really there under the ocean, and the depth and the perspective that VR gives you this real sense of just how deep those sea beast filled ocean trenches are. And then when you swim up to the surface and you pop out from the waves and you see these giant planets overhead, or these asteroids or giant hailstones raining down in the water above you, it just feels like you're on another planet. It's definitely one of the ones I'd really, really recommend you trying out if you have a PC VR headset. Oh, and also the baby penguins are really cute as well. Prolific flat to VR modder Luke Ross's Real VR mod for Red Dead Redemption 2 came next for me, but it wasn't the only one of his VR mods I featured on the channel this year. I also featured two of his Mafia mods more recently as well, Mafia 1 and Mafia 3. What's interesting about Luke's work though is that it never uses motion controls, but to be honest with you, that never really affects the immersion for me. I know some people are a little bit sniffy about only wanting to play VR games using motion controls, but that's not really what Luke Ross's mods are about, I don't think. At least in my opinion, anyway. What I think they're about is being able to experience these incredible open worlds as if you were there. Luke's previously done GTA 5, and holy crap, being in GTA 5 in VR is bonkers. But playing things like Mafia 1 or Red Dead Redemption 2 in VR is honestly like being in a time machine. The difference having an open world sandbox to play in when you're in VR compared to a linear experience is leagues apart. The best example I can think of a retail release game with an open world would be Walking Dead Saints and Sinners, which is one of my favourites ever. And that's because every time you step into that world, you're never really sure what to expect, and you're making up your own adventure as you go along. And that is magnified massively in open world games like Red Dead Redemption 2. You are let off the leash to be as mischievous as you want. You can try running over pedestrians, you can go onto someone's farm and shoot all their sheep, or you could role play the game as if you were actually there in real life and obey all the traffic signals and just completely absorb yourself in the experience. And having a controller in your hands rather than motion controls, it takes away none of that for me. Absolutely none of it. And long may Luke Ross continue with his real VR mods, because I have so much fun noodling about in those crazy open worlds. So what else was there? Oh yeah, there was Kit's marvellous MechWarrior 5 mod. I didn't play a huge amount of that after I'd made my VR Corner video, but while I was playing it, it basically felt like I was starring in my very own anime, striding along in this big mech, stamping on soldiers, blowing fools up with drunken missiles in furious mech-on-mech combat. If you're a fan of MechWarrior games, I don't think there's any other way you can get as immersed in that property as Kit's mod, unless, of course, you played Steel Battalion for the Microsoft Kinect, which you should never do. Never do. And then, of course, most recently, I played through the entirety of the Resident Evil 2 remake in first person, in VR, with motion controls, thanks to an early preview build of Prey Dog's upcoming mod for the game. Mr. X in VR will make you go weak at the knees, so probably play it sat down. And also the lickers are terrifying, and William Birkin just looks so gross, but also the detail to the environments comes across so well in VR. It was mind-boggling for me that someone was able to take a game that was specifically made for third-person shooting and give you hands and free aim and the ability to play through the entire campaign, start to finish, with very few bugs or issues at all. Now, Prey Dog is also actually working on a VR mod for a few other Resident Evil games as we speak, including one for Resident Evil Village, so he is really putting Capcom to shame with this. So if one modder can do all of this in his spare time, well, come on, Capcom, you've got some catching up to do. So, in conclusion, it really has been the incredibly hard work of VR modders like Kit, like Luke Ross, like Elliot Tate, like Prey Dog, and developers like IO Interactive who've been brave enough to embrace VR and push forward with it, even though it might not make them as much money as a flat screen game. They're the ones who have really made gaming exciting and interesting and groundbreaking for me this year. Their hard work really shows the potential for VR going forwards, and I really do hope that this is just a glimpse of what the future could look like if every video game that was released had the option to choose between flat or VR. So here's to all you enterprising modders out there, and all you developers who are willing to push the boat out and brave the brand new frontiers of VR. It's you lot who have made my year and have given me the most fun in 2021. I can't wait to see what's in store for VR in 2022, but you can be sure I'll be featuring it right here on Ian's VR Corner every Sunday. So, have a great new year all, and I'll see you again in 2022.